What's going on? This is Theo Greminger, aka the OG Fantasy. Welcome to the 2 Minute Drill. 2 Minute Drill is my biggest takeaways, mostly fantasy football, some NFL football takeaways from week 4. Week 4 was a wild one. We were just dumped with news. We had tilting performances. You had Thursday night, which was just like about as tilting as it gets. You had David Montgomery, and we first heard in the morning that David Montgomery was going to miss Thursday's game against the Green Bay Packers. Then, about half an hour later, you heard that he's actually going to play on Thursday night. Fantasy managers didn't know what to make of this situation. Most rankings still had Jahmyr Gibbs like inside of the RB1 line, and David Montgomery you'd see somewhere between like running back 20 and running back 28. I played some of my David Montgomery shares. I also benched some of my David Montgomery shares. It was very, very tilting, uh, for the teams that didn't use him. And you felt really, really great about the teams that did use him because David Montgomery had such a smash game. The Lions look like the team to beat in not only at the NFC North, but they look like a team that could make a real playoff run. Their defense is getting better. Montgomery had like a historically good game. This was the first time a Detroit Lion has ever rushed for 3 touchdowns in Green Bay. He had a bruising 32 carries to go along with those 3 touchdowns. So, like, this Lions coaching staff really trusts Montgomery. I think it speaks volumes to their confidence in him and also their confidence in his health to give him this sort of a workload. His situation is better than Jamal Williams was last year. Like a lot of people are saying this is the Jamal Williams of 2023. Like Jamal Williams was very fortunate to find the end zone, from the 1 yard line, from the 2 yard line, over and over again. David Montgomery is doing it with a lot more volume. I think also the Lions are just a better team than last year. And as much joy as there was for David Montgomery managers, there was also a ton of fantasy frustration for Jahmyr Gibbs managers. Gibbs was like an ADP rocket ship this summer. He steamed up to the early third round in a ton of these FFPC and NFC drafts. And I saw him go in the second round a few times, especially as the summer moved along. This was a guy that the fantasy community and the dynasty community were head over heels over. I know I am a big Jahmyr Gibbs guy, and I still am, but there's definitely some frustration here. This wasn't like a floor falls out from under you performance, but it was extremely disappointing. It's national television, it's a primetime game. You go from thinking you have the backfield to yourself to sharing a backfield with David Montgomery, but maybe thinking it would be a little bit more of a split because of David Montgomery's health, only to see Montgomery completely dominate the touches. Gibbs did catch 4 passes, and I think that part of his game cannot be ignored. He gave you 9.2 PPR points, and I think like based on what we saw from fantasy Twitter, it might as well have been 0 PPR points. But the book on Jahmyr Gibbs is certainly not written yet. He's had some high moments and definitely some lows. We saw a 9 target game in week 2. We saw him with a productive rushing performance in week 3, albeit a game they didn't target him. I think that his trajectory as the season moves along is going to point up, but his overall scoring and somewhat of his upside is capped based on the fact that David Montgomery is there. Montgomery looks like the ADP smash. Jahmyr Gibbs right now looks like an ADP disappointment. But a lot of times these rookie running back performances, like it changes. The whole perspective changes as the season moves along. Injuries definitely play a factor. Like, knock on wood, if Amon-Ra St. Brown missed some time, I think that Gibbs would get a lot more work. Knock on wood, if Sam Laporta missed some time, I think Gibbs would get a lot more work. And certainly David Montgomery's already missed one game with an injury. It could happen again. But Gibbs was not a guy that we thought would get more work based on contingent upside. We thought it was just going to be a set it and forget it type situation. I think right now you've got to treat him as a flex. And when you have better opportunities to pivot, you can consider doing that. This is a guy where if I never thought I would say that 3 weeks ago, but that's kind of where we are at this point. He's still a talented player in a very, very good offense, but there are volume concerns for him, at least at this moment. I think things could change over the next few weeks. And speaking of disappointment, there is some concerning usage down in Duval, aka London. Calvin Ridley finds the end zone, but he finishes with only 2 catches on 2 targets. And the touchdown was kind of a busted coverage. There was an incredible week 1 performance of 8 catches for 101 yards and a touchdown. And everybody felt like Ridley looked like the smash pick from the 3rd round. But he's definitely fallen back to earth. You've now had 3 straight games with 40 yards or less receiving. He's in a 3-way tie with Evan Engram and Christian Kirk for the most receiving yards on the team with 173. But Ridley actually is 3rd in receptions. This is not the production fantasy managers were betting on when Ridley steamed up to like that Gibbs range, that early 3rd, late 2nd. There's a lot of Calvin Ridley managers who took him over Keenan Allen who wish that they could just go back and make that switch. I don't think Ridley is like a bust at ADP yet. It's way too early to say that. And he has found the end zone twice this season in 4 games, but he doesn't look like the smash pick that he did after week 1. You're definitely keeping him in your starting lineup, but he's more of a low end wide receiver 2 than a low end wide receiver 1, and that's where you were drafting him. There's a big tilting game this week where Jacksonville stays in London and hosts the red hot Buffalo Bills. Calvin Ridley having a big game there would do an absolute ton for his fantasy managers and really put them at ease about kind of the situation. So that's a tilting game. You also have the fact that Tre'Davious White looks like he's done for the year. Buffalo's defense has been unbelievable getting to the quarterback the last 2 weeks. This is a big opportunity for Jacksonville and a big opportunity for Ridley to get back on track. On the flip side, Evan Engram has had at least 5 catches in every single game. Evan Engram looks like one of the best picks you could have made at the tight end position. If I am in a trading league, I am kicking the tires on Evan Engram. I think that some managers might not realize how good a situation they have with Engram, and the overall scoring is not that high because Engram hasn't found the end zone yet. But Evan Engram looks as locked in as pretty much any tight end in football right now. Looks very, very good. Trevor Lawrence has continued to show his connection with Engram that we saw to end last season when Evan Engram basically won a lot of tight end premium managers their league. You also have this week 2 big wide receiver off the field news dumps. Cooper Kupp, there's optimism he'll play in week 5. The Rams host the Philadelphia Eagles. The Rams are now 2-2. This is kind of massive news for Cooper Kupp managers. There's kind of 2 boats of Cooper Kupp managers right now. There's the Cooper Kupp manager who took him in the 4th, 5th, 6th round, 7th round sometimes when the pessimism set in about his injury, about him heading to the IR, and about the overall concerns about him getting back to the field at a timely manner. In the late August drafts, early September drafts, he fell like a stone in ADP. Those managers could potentially be sitting on a 3-1 record, a 4-0 record, even a 2-2 record with a lot of points scored, where all of a sudden they could be getting back a locked in, let's not call him a 20 point per game scorer, but let's say a locked in 15 plus point per game scorer the moment he sets back on the field. Then you have the other boat where managers drafted Cooper Kupp in the 1st round in early drafts before he got hurt. Those managers might be looking at him as like a life raft that can get them out of potentially a bad situation. Now, based on some of the guys that have hit this year, those teams might be okay too. But any way you cut it, Cooper Kupp coming back is massive news for fantasy. I don't think that he's going to come back and do anything to Puka Nacua or Kyron Williams for that matter. I think those guys each have a pretty locked in role, but Cooper Kupp brings the quality of the offense up and makes Matt Stafford look better as a potential streamer. And it's Cooper Kupp, man. NFL Sundays are better when he's on the field. He's a special player, and we did not want to see him miss another season with injuries after his unfortunate injury last season that cost him basically the second half of the year when he was leading all wide receivers in points per game, more than Justin Jefferson when he went down. You also have Jameson Williams. Williams was supposed to return in week 7, but an NFL rule change basically made him eligible for week 5. Jameson Williams was missing with off the field gambling suspension. Now he's able to come back right away. I don't know what sort of impact he will make fantasy wise. He's definitely one of the fastest receivers, if not the fastest receiver on Detroit. This was a guy who was the 12th overall pick in the 2022 draft, did nothing last year, played 6 games, had 1 catch. I don't think he's the kind of guy that's going to find our lineups, but this could be a Jameson Williams makes the pie grow larger type argument. This sort of speed being put on the same field as Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, and all this offensive talent they have in Detroit, this could be like what really unlocks this offense and takes them to the next level. It also makes Jared Goff managers look very good. And if you drafted Jameson Williams in one of these best ball tournaments, thinking that you had him only for, a week 7 on, and you get 2 extra weeks out of him, you're feeling great about that as well. Jameson Williams certainly has the athleticism, the speed, and the pedigree to have some boom weeks, but definitely he's a guy that I want on my bench to see where it's going more than a guy that I'd want to cram in any sort of a lineup. So tread carefully, but feel great about your other Lions right now. We'll also cut back to Buffalo. We mentioned they play against Jacksonville this week in London. They make an absolute statement this past Sunday. This was the game of the year against Miami. The Miami Dolphins coming into Buffalo. Last year, they played 3 times, including the AFC playoffs. Every game was decided by 3 points or less. Miami nearly got them in the playoffs last year with Skylar Thompson behind center. Buffalo ends up winning by 3. And Miami had like the swag heading into this one. Miami had the juice heading into this one. Miami was coming off of a 70-point explosion in week 3. They had gone for over 700 yards of total offense and were coming into Buffalo feeling about as good about themselves as any team could. Miami also got back Jalen Waddle this week after missing him in that week 3 blowout against Denver. So everything was kind of lining up for another classic, and Buffalo just kind of ruined the story. This was a complete beatdown. It was a 48-20 Buffalo Bills win. Josh Allen has his best game of the season. He passes for over 300 yards. He has 4 touchdown passes. 3 of those touchdowns went to Stephon Diggs, and Stephon Diggs looked nasty. We talked about him on the 2-minute drill last week against Washington when he goes back to the DMV, balls out against Washington, doesn't find the end zone in that game, now finds the end zone 3 times, demoralized the Miami secondary. You also had Allen connecting with Gabe Davis on a touchdown, and Josh Allen puts the icing on the cake with an exclamation point rushing touchdown to start the 4th quarter. This Buffalo team is in fantastic shape. They're putting pressure on their opponents on both sides of the ball. The offense is coming into shape. Josh Allen looks like Josh Allen. And on the defensive side of the ball, no team in football over the last 2 weeks has put more pressure on opposing quarterbacks than Buffalo. Buffalo sacked Sam Howell 9 times. They get to Tua Tagovailoa a number of times yesterday, put pressure on him on a number of other plays. They basically shut down Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Didn't completely shut him out, but held both of them below 50 yards receiving. Buffalo is looking great. This is a 3-1 team with a ton of confidence heading into a big one in London against the Jaguars. And on the opposite side of the ball, Devon Achane is the real deal. It's funny, you had people saying, "Should I start Devon Achane this week?" And I'm like, "You're starting Devon Achane. The dude just scored a 50 burger. You're not going to leave this kind of upside on your bench." But there were still arguments being made that we can't trust the usage. This is a Raheem Mostert backfield. Achane is, I mean, it was really tiresome. It's overthinking at an extreme that it makes fantasy football a little bit annoying at times. Sometimes you just need to trust your eyes. A guy like Devon Achane with a mind like Mike McDaniel, once you see that, you don't put that back in the box. Devon Achane certainly didn't score 50 PPR points. That would have been wild, but he is absolutely for real. He scores Miami's first touchdown. He scores Miami's second touchdown. He scores 2 touchdowns in the first half. He finishes with 101 rushing yards and he adds 3 catches. He'll finish as a RB1 once again. I think he could be an RB1 for the rest of the season. He could be the league winner. That term gets tossed around a lot, but you were drafting Devon Achane, even if you were drafting in FFPC, NFFC leagues, you were drafting him in the 11th round, the 10th round, the 12th round. You're getting a player like this in the double digit rounds. He's giving you RB1 production. He's giving you a week winning week already in week 3 and another RB1 week in week 4. You're already seeing return on that investment. And the biggest news was not his production. It was that he outsnapped and outtouched Raheem Mostert. He also ran more routes than him. Devon Achane is the man in the Miami backfield. This is a fantastic situation. If you have him in a league where trades are allowed, don't trade Devon Achane. If you have the opportunity to go get Devon Achane, absolutely go get Devon Achane. In Dynasty, trade an ungodly amount of capital for him might make sense. This looks like the kind of guy that's going to be a fantasy star, and this does not seem like something that's going to be short-lived. Devon Achane looks like Chris Johnson used to. CJ2K 2.0, that might be Devon Achane. A small back that just breaks fantasy, and he can catch the ball. We might see Devon Achane go off this week. You have the New York Giants playing on Monday Night Football, coming into Miami on a short week with Miami coming off of a loss. This might be Devon Achane giving you 25 PPR points. Speaking of a lot of PPR points, AJ Brown is peaking in Philly. He was phenomenal in week 3. He had 9 catches for 131 yards in a cakewalk win over Tampa Bay on Monday Night Football. Then yesterday he goes out and tops it. He has 175 receiving yards. This was the second most he's ever had as an Eagle. And he had 2 touchdown catches. And the one touchdown just looked absolutely silly. The guy just, I mean, go watch it on replay. It's a fantastic play. One of the highlights of the weekend for me. Love watching AJ Brown when he's going off. This was the third time he's had a multiple touchdown performance as an Eagle. He's had a 3 touchdown game. Obviously, he didn't hit that, but he hit 2. He has 43 targets through 4 games played. AJ Brown can annihilate his career high of 145 in 2022. This was a guy that we always wanted more from target-wise in Tennessee. Goes to Philly in his first season, gets 145 targets, and we think maybe this is about what he will give us with Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, Jalen Hurts running the ball, but it doesn't seem that way. Philadelphia now is using him even more the last 2 weeks. He's on pace for close to 190 targets this season. I don't think he'll get there, but I do think that he's in great shape to give you like 170 target season. And for a player of his skill, you could be talking about the wide receiver 1 overall. And why do I say that? Because AJ Brown is capable of having some of the biggest boom weeks in football, and he's capable of having multiple touchdown weeks. That sounds funny, but multiple touchdown weeks on the horizon if he's getting this sort of a usage with this quality of an offense. You also had one of the weirdest games was Chicago against Denver. Justin Fields had career highs with 335 passing yards and 4 touchdowns. He connects with DJ Moore 8 times for 131 receiving yards, and Cole Kmet adds 2 touchdown catches. Justin Fields looks really, really good passing the ball, and then the fourth quarter comes and Chicago completely falls apart again. Denver comes all the way back, wins 31-28. The Bears drop to 0-4 on the season. I don't know what's going to happen here. I would have fired Eberflus already. I think he's inept. I don't know why they're not doing that. You also have Justin Fields starting to have trade rumors where they could move on from him. I don't know if it's going to be now or the offseason, but I do think Justin Fields is not a long-term Chicago Bear. It's very frustrating for fantasy managers to see this sort of a performance and balance that out with the performances we saw in the first few weeks of the year. They're still not running Justin Fields like they did last year, but this was definitely like at least a big sigh of relief. Chicago Bears Justin Fields fantasy managers probably got a win this week based on this performance. You feel good seeing it. I don't know where it's going to go from here. Terribly disappointing to see the loss, but it was good to see Fields have this sort of performance. And then on the other side of the ball, I talked about how I thought it was going to be the Marvin Mims show. It didn't happen. It's frustrating with Marvin Mims because I think he's so talented and he's not seeing a massive usage increase. He's seeing a slight usage increase. Marvin Mims actually leads Denver in receiving yards right now through 4 weeks played over Cortland Sutton and over Jerry Jeudy, who of course has only played 3 games, but still Marvin Mims leads them in receiving yards right now. I think his trajectory is pointing up, but it's another rookie that we really need to pay attention to, and that's Jaleel McLaughlin. McLaughlin finishes with 104 combined yards and a touchdown. He looks very, very good. Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine combined for 44 yards. Williams, of course, exited the game early with a hip injury. It's not expected to be something serious, but I don't think we can ignore McLaughlin. This is a player that showed a lot of juice this past Sunday. This was a comeback win. He showed more explosiveness than either of these backs so far this season. McLaughlin is averaging over 7 yards per carry, and Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine are both averaging like 3.6 and 3.7 yards per carry. We saw back in 2018 an undrafted free agent, Philip Lindsay, led Denver's backfield. He rushed for over 1,000 yards and added 10 combined touchdowns. I think history could be repeating itself with McLaughlin this year as an undrafted free agent leading the Denver backfield. And if you will recall, Royce Freeman was the heavily hyped back that year in Denver. He was a high draft pick out of Oregon versus Lindsay, the undrafted free agent out of Colorado. Lindsay ends up leading them for the season. This could be the case with McLaughlin leading over Javonte Williams. Javonte Williams was not drafted by this coaching staff. There's no like, hey, we've got to get Javonte, we look smart for drafting him. This coaching staff had nothing to do with Javonte Williams. They inherited Javonte Williams. Jaleel McLaughlin was a unbelievably productive player at Youngstown State. Again, he's a smaller back from I'm not going to call Youngstown State a small school. They're a powerhouse for FCS purposes, but it's still a small school in the grand scheme of things. So it's a smaller player from a smaller school, but you can't deny the talent. You can't deny the explosiveness. Denver moves to 1-3. They have the Jets this week coming to Denver. I wonder if we see an increased role for Jaleel McLaughlin. The injuries marred the day. Mike Williams, hamstring injury. We don't know what's going on there. He could miss some time. Incredibly frustrating. Mike Evans had been a top 5 wide receiver through 3 games. Leaves Tampa Bay's big win over New Orleans with a hamstring injury. Pat Freiermuth exited Pittsburgh with another hamstring injury. Kenny Pickett suffered a knee injury. Devontae Adams suffered a shoulder injury. Sent him to the locker room, but then he quickly returned. But I think he's a little banged up. But Devontae Adams is just a warrior. If he's out there, no worries. But shoulders are tricky. T. Higgins, rib injury. He's going to be missing some time. These injuries are piling up. Been a year of attrition where we've already had Nick Chubb done for the season, Saquon Barkley, Austin Eckler, Deontay Johnson. And then on the defensive side of the ball, we talked about Tre'Davious White. And even Micah Parsons limped off the field for Dallas yesterday. This has been a tilting season, a year of attrition, and fantasy football being a game of attrition. We've been reminded of this each and every week. Make sure you have good players on your bench. Make sure you're stashing handcuffs. This weekend is showing you all you need to know. Christian McCaffrey is dominant. This is another week. Christian McCaffrey has another huge game this week against Arizona. No Elijah Mitchell. And it's like San Francisco staff is like, you know what? We don't have our preferred backup running back. Let's just use McCaffrey. And they sure did. McCaffrey went wild. 106 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, 7 receptions, 71 receiving yards, and another touchdown score through the air. McCaffrey has now scored a touchdown in 13 straight games as a 49er. Why is this significant? Because McCaffrey sets the San Francisco record for most touchdowns in consecutive games played, with 13 games breaking Jerry Rice's record with 12 games played. I'm showing my age, but if anybody remembers Jerry Rice, like, this is an incredible feat for Christian McCaffrey. He's in the record books with one of the greatest 49ers ever, maybe the best 49er ever in Jerry Rice. And McCaffrey is just on a collision course with a RB1 overall finish. This would be the first time that a player in their 7th season finishes as RB1 overall since, I believe, LaDainian Tomlinson. This has been the running back position has been last year Eckler gets it in his 6th year, but that's been kind of the exception to the norm. This has been a younger running back type thing to finish as RB1 overall. McCaffrey's about to do it again this year. It's very impressive. He's a fantastic player. That team might be the best team in the NFC. Brandon Ayuk went nuts again, goes over 140 yards receiving. The 49ers are for real. I think Brock Purdy, if you need a streamer, go ahead and put him in there. He's a low-end QB1 for me based on the quality of the offense and his quality of play. This week we get San Francisco against Dallas. Not a bad game. That game is going to be lit. It's going to be a really, really, really great game on tap with maybe 2 of the best 3 teams in the NFC right now. TJ Hawkinson goes into Carolina and turns invisible. This was a guy that was averaging 17 points per game heading into week 4. He was the tight end 1 overall, and he goes into Carolina and just does nothing. Worst game, one of his worst games as a Viking. He ends the game with two catches on 3 targets for 24 yards receiving, and he was not the only invisible Minnesota pass catcher. Jordan Addison finishes with a goose egg on only 1 target. Really, really disappointing. Hawkinson was in every single person's lineup, as he should have been. And Addison was a guy that a lot of fantasy managers were benching viable alternatives in order to get him in the lineup. Big time disappointment from Addison. Big time disappointment from Hawkinson. They've got to get back on track next week. Kansas City comes into Minnesota, and Minnesota has got to be able to put up a big number. They're not going to shut down Kansas City, especially with that Minnesota defense. They've got to be able to put some points on the board. They're capable of doing that, but TJ Hawkinson and Addison have got to step back up and give them the production that they need. There was also some goofy turnovers in this game, just a goofy game in general, but Justin Jefferson was Jeffersonian once again, gives you 28.5 PPR points, catches 2 touchdown passes. Justin Jefferson against Kansas City is going to be a very cool thing to see. If you're a fantasy football manager, as anybody watching this video is, seeing Patrick Mahomes on one side of the ball, Travis Kelce on the attached to him against a guy like Justin Jefferson, it's why we play this game. You want to see great players go up against one another and a chance to put up big numbers. I think it's awesome. Another tight end was actually very visible this week, though, and that was Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews has 5 receptions. 2 of them go for touchdowns. One of them, he just high points the ball like a complete beast. Lamar Jackson puts it where only Mark Andrews can catch it, comes down with it, ends up with 2 touchdown catches. Baltimore just annihilates Cleveland. They beat them 28-3 on the road in Cleveland. Lamar Jackson has 4 touchdowns. This team is definitely heading in the right direction. Zay Flowers was quiet, still makes a big splash play. Baltimore is in great shape. They're 3-1, one of the best teams in the AFC. The Todd Monken offense is working, and the Mark Andrews Lamar Jackson connection is alive and well, looking like a potential tight end one overall season for Mark Andrews. He's currently the leader in points per game at the tight end position, but he's only played in 3 games after missing the opener. Return of the King. I fade Derrick Henry. I talk about how I'm worried about Derrick Henry regressing. I talk about how he's averaging 3.2 yards per carry through 3 games. I talk about Tyjae Spears out snapping him in 2 out of 3 games. And of course, Derrick Henry goes out and does Derrick Henry things. In the words of Omar Little from The Wire, if you come at the king, you best not miss. And I came at the king and I totally missed. So a big hat tip to Derrick Henry. Of course, I had him in a couple of lineups, but when you're fading a guy and he does that, you have to like basically check yourself. Shouldn't have faded you, Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry had, a usual type performance with 22 carries for 122 rushing yards and a touchdown. Then they line him up in the wildcat formation at quarterback, and he passes for a touchdown too. Classic Derrick Henry game. Tennessee's 2-2. They crush Cincinnati, 27-3. Tennessee's kind of back. Derrick Henry's kind of back, and I got to keep my mouth shut about Derrick Henry. Hat tip to you, King Henry. Should have never doubted you. Cincinnati, on the other hand, has major concerns. Joe Burrow is not Joe Burrow. He looks like a shell of himself. He looks banged up. He looks indecisive. And in Sunday's loss, Burrow passed for only 165 yards. He has only 2 touchdown passes in 4 games played. It's time to pivot. I'm going to be benching Joe Burrow this week on any team that I have him. It's not like a reactionary benching where a guy plays poorly and you're like, I'm so mad at him, I've got to put him on my bench. No, this is a Joe Burrow looks hurt and Cincinnati has major issues. He also loses T. Higgins. Higgins is going to miss some time with a rib injury. Tyler Boyd is going to fill in for Higgins. It's not the same. Tyler Boyd is not T. Higgins right now. It definitely loses a dynamic weapon in Higgins. You saw Higgins with a big performance in week 2, and this is disappointing. This is of course disappointing for Joe Burrow. Drafters pushed him up in ADP. I think if I was a Cincinnati, I probably would have sat him down and let him get healthy. Obviously, he's their franchise quarterback. They're a team that views themselves as a playoff team. Now they're 1-3, and I think the wheels could absolutely fall off this week in Arizona. Cincinnati will be favored in that game. They should win that game, but that Arizona team plays very hard. That's a tricky game for Cincinnati to go to basically head west and beat a Arizona team that already beat Dallas at home, and now they get a chance to beat another 2022 playoff team in Cincinnati. Their fans are going to be fired up. Their team will be fired up, and Cincinnati is headed in the wrong direction. Alvin Kamara returns and is a usage monster. Let's not focus on the production. He had 84 combined yards, which is fine. We're not criticizing that, but he also had 14 targets and he caught 13 of them. This is something where, you would have expected like a massive performance with that sort of usage. So he had a 36% target share in his first game back. And again, if he's going to get this sort of usage where 25% or more target share, and he dominated carries. Kendre Miller was completely invisible. Alvin Kamara had 11 rush attempts to Kendre Miller's single rush attempt. And this is a week after Kendre Miller had 9 rush attempts in week 3. So Kamara is getting all of the touches on the rushing attempts. Taysom Hill still mixes in, which is a little annoying, but Kendre Miller is not a threat. And the targets, this is a beautiful thing. If you've ever managed Alvin Kamara in the past, the smash games happen a lot of times when he gets, double-digit targets. He gets high amount of targets. This is a guy who's been a multiple-time 80 catch or more receiver out of the backfield. If he's getting this sort of usage, I think he's a low-end RB1. I think you have to feel really good about where you selected him and about where he's heading based on this usage. And then speaking of usage, we got to talk about Puka Nacua. Almost every week, I have to talk about Puka Nacua, and for good reason. He's sensational. This is a player who, obviously had the incredible start to the season in weeks 1 and 2, has 12 and a half PPR points in week 3 on Monday Night Football's loss to the Bengals, then bounces back this week in a major way against Indianapolis. He finishes with 163 receiving yards and what should be the first of many touchdowns in his career as a Ram. What's crazier is that he's already set the record for most catches in a player's first 4 games, or excuse me, first 5 games of their career. And he's done this in only 4 games played, which is wild. And it's also crazy that he has 163 receiving yards and a touchdown, and it's not like breaking fantasy Twitter. Like people are like, okay, Puka Nacua is a baller. This is not surprising to me. He's a stud, and he had a really big game. This is not any reason to get overly excited. This is what it is, which is just crazy. A player who was a 5th-round draft pick, a player who a lot of fantasy managers were able to add off the waiver wire in week 1, a player who people were drafting in the 18th round of best ball, and now he's just this locked-in stud. When we look back on this season, it's the season of Puka Nacua. No matter what he does the rest of the way, this was incredible. And I think like Cooper Kupp returning is not going to do much of anything to Puka Nacua. There's definitely going to be certain situations where Kupp is absolutely the first read on offense, and Nacua is going to lose that. But I think it basically evaporates guys like Van Jefferson and Tyler Higbee. His target share is going to go way, way down. Cooper Kupp, we also don't know how healthy he is. Like we know he's coming back, but we don't know if he's a little bit hobbled. I think Puka Nacua, you have to still treat him as a high-end wide receiver 2 right now. And I think that there's a chance that he out-targets Cooper Kupp, at least for the first few weeks Kupp is there. Puka Nacua is not going anywhere. He's an absolute stud. One of the craziest things we've ever seen with his rapid ascent. We moved him way up the Dynasty rankings at Player Profiler. Definitely check out those updated Dynasty rankings every single week. And Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams has a career high 102 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. He adds 3 catches. He now has 6 touchdowns on the season. Kyren Williams is like one of the best running back pickups you could have made this year. Really, really strong start for Kyren Williams. He looks like the real thing. I'm super excited about the teams where I have Kyren. I do worry about him holding up a little bit, but at the end of the day, his competition right now is Ronnie Rivers. He's a much better player than Ronnie Rivers. They're not giving Zach Evans the opportunity, and they moved Cam Akers. Kyren Williams is here to stay. Again, I'm Theo Greminger. Look for the 2-minute drill as an article on playerprofiler.com. Check out my waiver wire column on playerprofiler.com. I also drop a video here every week on that. Check out First Class Fantasy. Check out press coverage. Check out the Sonic Truth Dynasty podcast. Check out the GOAT District. You can find me on a lot of podcasts here, but definitely check out my written work. I put a lot of time into it, and pretty much everything you hear on these videos is based on my written work. I'm also writing a sleepers column that drops at the end of the week, and there's a video that comes along with that as well. I hope you crush your leagues this week. Stick with Player Profiler all week long. Stick with us all season long. We're going to win a lot of leagues. We're going to win a lot of money, and have a great rest of your week.